Hello and welcome to The Rest is Entertainment, the questions edition with me, Marina Hyde.
And me, Richard Osman. Once again, it's questions and answers.
Yeah, sorry, I should make that clear.
Not just questions. Although the questions were more fun last week than the answers,
yes,
I have to say.
and they always will be.
And it'll be so much quicker.
Right, Lisa Burns, you talk a lot about overnights, catch-up, streaming, different platforms, etc., and how well or not a show is doing in the ratings. But how are the numbers actually collected? This is a very good question.
It is a good question. And it hasn't changed a lot for many, many years. Certainly when we talk about linear TV. So we talked about Gladiators getting 6.4 million on the other show this week. And it is a number of people have Barb boxes in their home. And
Barb is the British Audience Research Board.
Exactly right. You can already tell it's like from the 80s.
Yeah.
And they are attached to their television, and essentially it can measure what you are watching, and you can then input if there's more than one person in your household watching a particular show.
They can be attached to devices nowadays. They have an app
Yeah.
that can do it, so it has kept pace with the modern era.
Yeah.
How many families or households have these boxes? I think it's
around 5,000. I think something around 5,000, which is, we'll get onto whether that's representative. Essentially, all that gets sent back to the Barb headquarters.
And you have to say who was watching in your household.
Yeah.
That you have to be quite specific. You can't just, they can't think that the whole family were tuning into, e.g., Gladiators, if it's just one of you dreaming of Jet on your own.
Yeah. One of you dreaming of Jet on your own. Is that a euphemism?
It is, I'm afraid.
Yeah. And those all get fed through and is aggregated. And the next morning, the overnights come through, which is how many people were watching the night before. These days, you then a week later get the catch-up figures, which is what everyone was watching on streaming as well. And if you're Netflix and people like that, you have your own metrics to do it. But the Barb box is the thing that's been the heart of the overnights for many, many, many years. It has the odd inconsistency, but not by much is the truth. If a show starts big and creeps up a bit the next week, it will always creep up a bit the next week and the next week. I've never seen an actual problem where a show that lots of people watched looks like no one watched it, or vice versa. There was one week with Channel 4 when they had a show. It's a new panel show that they put on Saturday nights, and they held great store by it. And the ratings came through, and it said it got 2.4 million. And they suddenly went, thank God, we knew it. We got ourselves a hit. And then it came through, there was a glitch in the data, and it got something like 0.8 million. But just for a day, they thought they had a hit on their hands, and they didn't. So it used to rule everything, the overnights.
I slightly love the idea of the box, because it's like, we think of it, it's like a sort of nation of goggle boxes, but it's this kind of 5,000 household strong panel. It's unpaid. You get vouchers. You get paid in vouchers for sort of high street shops that could be popular for all ages, which I think there's something so homespun about it all.
I love the idea of it. But also, people say, how can you tell the viewing habits of a nation from 5,000 people? That's plenty enough. Any polling organisation will tell you, if you want a, general election, whatever it is, 2,000 and above, that's what you need. 5,000 is not bad because there's lots of smaller channels now. And occasionally the Barb box can make a difference there. I think there was, someone was telling me a show, can't remember what was on, not ITV3, but one of the smaller channels. And the ratings would sort of go up, and it would do well for a few weeks, and it would do badly for a few weeks. And it was all down to one guy who worked on the oil rigs, who would who loved the show. So when he was home, he would watch it, and when he went away, he wouldn't watch it. And he was the entire 80,000 viewership of
that's incredible.
Of the show.
There's a button you press which says "I'm away, I'm on holiday, I'm away," so that you can sort of put the closed sign on your Barb panel door.
Someone I know has got a Barb box. I've recently discovered. Someone's recently been added to the panel. I will keep that person's identity.
But that is
quiet.
Immense prestige as far as I'm concerned. That is.
Can you imagine?
How long had they been trying to get on the panel for?
Oh, I don't think they've tried. I think it was random.
Like jury service?
Like jury service. I think, or being one of the sugar babes. I think it just happens to you. But think of the pressure, though, every time you're watching
something. I would really take my responsibilities incredibly seriously. It's television. Yeah. It's huge, Richard.
Like if I'm watching Gladiators, I'm like, but am I really, really enjoying it? Do I want to watch Ant and Dec's Limitless win instead? Or do I actually think it's a responsibility to the nation?
Uneasy is the head that wears the crown. It's
uneasy is the head that has a Barb box.
A heavy crown. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But so that's how it's done. It is not perfect, but it's not bad, is the truth. It's a pretty accurate reflection of what people are watching and what people are not watching. And if ever something incredibly weird happens, it's usually an hour later they go, oh, there was a mistake in the data. So it's very, very, very trusted by all the channels and all the advertisers. Here's a question from Jamie Cowling. He says, one for Marina, please. How do newspapers decide which columnists are right for them? It seems baffling to me that particularly in an era when budgets are light and it's digital first, some columnists have regular features. Tell us about columnists and tell us about newspapers and their economic worth.
Well, it's interesting. I think sort of columnists are slightly different. I am a newspaper columnist. I think the columnists are slightly different from other areas in the paper. I will say for The Guardian, one thing that I really value is that they, a few years ago, started giving us our data. So you can see the minute your piece is launched online, you can see how the numbers it's doing in real time, where the referrals are coming from. Maybe they're coming from the front page of the website because it happens to be there, or maybe they're coming from Apple News or from Twitter or from Facebook or all sorts of other things. And you can see your numbers. Now, that's going to make me sound as though I just think it's all a numbers game, which I don't, because there's lots of parts of a newspaper that are sort of, perhaps they're unloved, perhaps it's a sort of kind of niche or foreign reporting that's really important. And it may not do huge numbers, but it's really important that it's covered and it's really important that it's there. Having said that, I do think that columnists is probably, I could be wrong about this. I mean, I'm not the employer, I'm just the employed, but columnists is a numbers game, I think, really. And you get people who you think are going to get large amounts of numbers, you hope, entertain people or whatever it is. People talk a lot about sort of hate watching or people you love to hate and you read like that. And there are a lot of people and you'll see that their columns might go viral and sometimes people are laughing at the columns and sometimes people just can't believe that person said that thing and it becomes a sort of, so, they get a lot of numbers that way. I would say that what they really, really want is viewership or eyeballs to translate into subscriptions and into or donations in the case of The Guardian's membership model. And therefore, the hate watch thing, you're not going to pay for people that you can't really stand, or you just think that they've written some outrageous thing this week and you're going to scream about it on Twitter for a day. But I do think it's important to get the numbers. And I think probably as a columnist, you want to get high numbers or a specific type of deep engagement. One thing I really like about the way we have our data is that you can see how long it was read for, whether it was read right to the, you can see it was read at a percentage score of how the people who read it, did they read it to the end, things like that.
With your data, do you get to see other people's data as well?
Yes, you do. And of course, it's important that my enemy should fail as well.
So you get to see everyone's data?
Yes.
But
you can see the data of the articles. You can see
all
any
the
article,
articles in the paper, really?
Yeah, and whoever's written it, and I suppose you can see other people's numbers, yes.
So you can see how long people read theirs for as
yes,
well,
you
so
can.
You can compare and contrast.
There are certain things that affect that, like if something gets referred from Apple News, you'll get, because it's sort of global, you'll get these huge spikes in numbers, but they tend not to follow through with the same engagement because it's just, it doesn't get so deeply read. But it's really interesting, and it's something that I personally pay a lot of attention to. And other papers may have completely different kind of, The Guardian, I'm sure, has much more sophisticated measuring than what we're even allowed to see. There are other papers who've been interested in hiring me at various points. People like the New York Times, other places like that have different ways of measuring, and they have different things that they would want from you. They might want you to, I don't know, be a columnist for an American paper because they think that they want you to bring in an Anglophone audience. Everyone now is chasing the same sort of, it's a bit like, it's gone global. It's a bit like Netflix or whatever. You're chasing kind of global eyeballs. So they might feel that you can bring that in.
Global eyeballs.
Global eyeballs. Sorry, that's not a very good way of putting it.
That's a good name for a podcast.
Yeah, I know. I'm slightly, I am a writer, I mean, really, global eyeballs. Anyway.
But how true is that of the whole newspaper industry? So I always think this, when you sort of look at some of the stuff that's thrown up by the algorithm, everything is ruled by clicks, right? Or you have to have those clicks to do the other work.
Yes, you do. But I think that there is a danger where you can just constantly have kind of ridiculous headlines to draw people in, or the clickbaity stuff, or kind of absurd positions, or in some cases, I've thought always sort of quite exploitative young people writing personal essays of one type or another that I always advise people not to write if they're asking me how to get it started, because they can get you a huge amount of attention for one day. But then I don't think the pastoral care is often there in terms of the people who commission these things, and they can, they blow up. You're not really looked after. You're suddenly at the centre of a storm for writing something, or you've written about some terrible thing that's happened to you. And then I think go back and write those stories when you've become more established as a writer. I really do feel that. We've gone a bit tangentially off there, but you can get, for those kind of personal first-person things, which is why you see a lot more of that now, you can get big, big numbers. But it's getting people to stick around, to come back because they like the same thing every week. I personally think that is the big thing, to maintain numbers week after week, and also ideally to get people to subscribe to your publication or to donate to your publication, or whatever, in whatever way keeps it going.
Because listen, you're not going to say it, but you're almost always top of the numbers for The Guardian, and you do insane numbers on social media as well. Can you see how much of that engagement does lead to donations as well? Is that something you can see?
I can't see that actually within The Guardian.
Yeah.
I wonder if I could ask, but I do. You can talk to people who can tell you, roughly speaking, how much translates to subscriptions. And I know on other papers, they were at the time, for a while on the Telegraph, they were offering people a bonus for every person that said, I've subscribed because of X.
Well, you'd like that, wouldn't you?
Yes, I would.
But in negotiations, the numbers are brought up. You're able to bring up those numbers if you're talking about renewing a contract or something.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I ought to talk about that, but I do think about my numbers a lot, and I think that you probably have to.
Yeah, I think you have to as well. You want to be making money for someone. It's nice to be paid, but you want to make sure that people who are paying you are getting a little bit extra on top, because then everyone's happy. And
yes, but equally you want to sometimes cash in the goodwill that you've got by telling lots of jokes about this or that, and think, I would like to write a column about the post office this week, back when perhaps it wasn't being covered in quite the way it is currently now. And you think you could do that. So I think in those terms it can be quite useful to have that sort of thing, that if people are coming back week after week, then sometimes you can present something unexpected in the space.
Yeah, great question.
Thank you, Richard. I'm much too embarrassed to talk about me anymore. Can we please move on? And I can say, this is a much better question. Steve McQueen says, who is your favourite Muppet?
Oh, that's a good question. I think probably Fozzie Bear.
Oh, really?
I think would be my favourite, because he's got that kind of old school vaudeville thing. Yeah. Do you know why he's called Fozzie Bear?
No.
Frank Oz.
Ah, really?
Fozzie, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there you go. He used to do the voice. Doesn't anymore, of course.
Okay.
How about yours?
Mine would be Miss Piggy and Kermit. Just a couple, on again, off again. I am here for all of their drama. I do actually have quite a lot of sympathy with Miss Piggy, because I know she wears her heart on her sleeve, and I know she's a handful, aren't we all? Yeah. But I sometimes feel that Kermit is a little withholding.
Yeah, I can live without Kermit.
Yeah. There's a South Park episode actually where Wendy keeps sending Wendy's Stan's girlfriend. She keeps sending him really long texts, and he just replies each time with the thumbs up emoji. I slightly feel that's the story of the Piggy and Kermit relationship. That I think he should sort of step up. And
I like Stadler and Waldorf as well.
Yeah, of course, with the critics.
That's exactly. Here is a question for you. Nettie Arimel says, what is the fourth wall? I've heard it referred to, however, I don't know what it really means. Is there also a first, second and third wall?
The fourth wall is it's the invisible wall that separates the audience from the actors. And most plays and things, and most TV drama you see nowadays, almost all without exception, it's almost like you're looking in through a window. They're not acknowledging you. Your presence isn't being acknowledged. I think Stanislavski called it invisible solitude. These things are happening on the stage.
Stanislavski.
Stanislavski.
He has something for every occasion, didn't he?
Well, yes, I think he does, really.
Actually, do you know what? He was my favourite Muppet.
The proscenium arch in the theatre was originally, you can imagine that went over the stage. And your answer to the other part of your question, the first, second and third walls are the
side of the stage.
The side of the stage and the back of the stage. But actually the fourth wall is a really relatively recent invention in the whole of drama, because It's obviously existed almost as long as humans have existed, and the actors were forever talking to the audience and involving them, and there were choruses, and there was an acknowledgement that this was an artifice, that this wasn't really happening. And it's only as things started to become more and more naturalistic, 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, that the idea that people on stage would stop acknowledging people in the audience. And then, but you still now see it. Obviously, it was used to huge effect in Fleabag, where she turns around, and what it gives you is that allows you, I guess, you as the audience know more than the characters, which is a sort of great position always to be in a drama.
So the fourth wall on television is the screen.
Is the screen.
Essentially. And any time someone looks down the barrel at you directly in the middle of a drama, they're breaking the fourth wall. And
it's very rare in television these days. And you go back to some of the things of the 80s, which we were talking about, sort of something like House of Cards, where Francis Urquhart, the original, who later played by sort of Kevin Spacey in the US adaptation, will look out and speak to the audience. I was thinking that Robert Lindsay did it in GBH.
Miranda does it.
Yes,
Miranda
yes,
talks to the audience.
It's saying
Mrs. Brown's Boys.
Yes,
they do it.
It's
That's
self-conscious.
why we mentioned it, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's why we mentioned it. It's self-conscious, and in some cases, in those things, like perhaps like in House of Cards and GBH, they're kind of reaching for to some extent, Shakespearean vibe. You're thinking about these epic stories of downfalls and betrayals, and there's something quite sort of Shakespearean and old-timey about that. And so you might have the equivalent of a kind of chorus, but in general, it's rare, and you really have to earn it, I think, because people want to feel that it takes you out of the world, obviously, so it has to be really important to make it work.
I quite like it. They do it in books as well. There's when an author directly addresses you as a reader.
Yeah.
And there's something about it I quite like. As you say, I think it takes people too much out of the world. So it's not something I would particularly do myself, but I like it when an author has the confidence to do it.
Yeah,
so that's the fourth
like
law.
all those things, you can, once you know the rules, you've got to be really good, then you can break them and it can really work.
Shall we take a pause and listen to some messages from our sponsors?
Let's indeed do that.
No flipping.
Welcome back to the Rest is Entertainment Questions Edition. I am kicking off immediately with a hard hitter, Richard.
Questions and Answers Edition.
Oh, sorry, yes. From Colin Evans.
Let's just call it Questions Edition.
Can we call it the Questions Edition?
Yes,
so that
let's do that.
Yes, I'm never going to get it right. I've got the synaptic connection now just won't make itself, so I'm always going to just call it the Questions Edition.
Let's call it TRIETQE.
Moving on. Colin Evans. Richard, which is worse, the House of Games or pointless board games? Both, of course, serious family breakdowns in this household due to the high hopes we held of being fans of both shows.
Oh, goodness, that's such a good question. Yes, I will say this. I'm not a fan of either. I like both the shows. When there's all sorts of spin-offs that come when you make a TV show, and board games are one of them, they're not particularly lucrative for anybody. There must be a bit lucrative.
Otherwise, you would have surely masterminded it and said, I will take care of this.
Well, yeah, so the pointless one is almost incomprehensible. The one good thing about the pointless board game is it gives you loads of question cards.
Yeah.
So I would say if you've got that board game, just take the question cards and make your own format.
Yes.
Is what I would say. House of Games board game, I have not played. The House of Games books that Alan Connor writes,
yes.
who's the chief question editor, they're pretty good because there's lots of questions from the show, but he also writes some new ones, and you can just go through that in any order you want to. But yeah, in general, I've never been across the board games. It's the sort of thing that they sort of come to you right at the end of the process and say, "Is this okay?" And of the 50 things you're doing that day, you kind of go, "I mean, no, but what do you want me to do?" People always say when you do apps as well, there's not really that much money in apps for TV shows. I think that the program itself, that's the wellspring of the thing that you try and take care of. The books I think are good, but yeah, board games is one of those things that I'd like to develop my own board game.
Yeah, but it's not related to. I'm sorry, I played a sort of traitors one at the weekend, and I'm not in a Scottish castle sitting around a round table in a very, very high stakes battle for my future. And it's just not as fun doing it round my table. And there's no real way that you can create.
The only similarity was Claudia was there.
Yeah.
It's the only one. I think board games are tricky because they're different to television shows, and they have to. It's tough for the board game companies. I will give them that. They want to do stuff with rules, but honestly, people just want the question cards. I think, and then you can play it however you want. So
we've got some House of Games question cards, the small set that is better.
Okay, because then you do it your own way. Yeah, don't worry about the formats and all that kind of stuff. just play with the cards, I would say.
I would love you to do a board game. Will you do a board game? You surely will at some point.
I don't know. It's a good question. It'd be a bit of fun, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Good question. Put me on the spot, though. That's tricky for me.
Yes, okay.
That's very personal to me, the board game thing.
Yes, I know. It really is hard.
Yeah, I used to, on Twitter, every reply used to be that this board game is terrible for Pointless.
Yeah.
I don't get it so much for House of Games, but the Pointless board game, I think, was very disappointing for many Christmases.
It's good you're not one of those people who sort of puts it in their biography. I do not do the board games.
I had to eventually.
Did you?
Well, I had to do a tweet just saying, guys, I've nothing to do with the board game. I'm so sorry. Sorry I ruined Christmas. Oh, here's an interesting one from Duncan Smith. Thank you, Duncan. My question is, why do film and TV extras not get credited? They spend many hours on set, do an important job, yet the carpenter's assistant's cousin twice removed makes it to the credits. Doesn't seem fair, says Duncan.
Right. Well, I can, on something like film or television, first of all, I have to, Duncan, take a slight issue that the carpenter's assistant cousin, or as you put it, I realise you're exaggerating for comic effect, but those jobs are hugely important. Those people get there at 4 a.m. and they'll probably be last to leave at like the sparks, the grips, setting stuff up. And those jobs are massively important, and they will be there for the whole shoot. And sometimes this can be for a year.
And they'll have been there for 6 months before the shoot.
Yeah, and they have not turned up one day and been an extra in a street scene. Not to denigrate the work of those people, but if you've credited all of those people, you already look now on the credits for some, a lot of kind of superhero franchise films or films with a lot of CGI in, and there are genuinely about, I don't know, 600 or 700 sort of animated CG post-production people, and their names are tiny, 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 and they'll have been put in sort of run-on paragraphs, basically, really at the back end of the credits, and they will have spent, months on it, and they will have worked brutal hours under, sort of crunch culture where there aren't really enough VFX houses now to do the work that is required of most of these things, and people work kind of exhausting hours. So you can't, I don't think, put what's called background or supporting artists, different ways of describing the same things. You can't really necessarily credit all those people. Not that they aren't valued. In those old films, things like Gandhi, they had something like 300,000 extras.
Those would be long credits.
On Lawrence of Arabia, I think the extras had a mutiny, like a genuine mutiny. And, there can be situations in that where background or supporting artists feel they're being very badly treated. But there was a wonderful interview recently in The Guardian with a woman who's been an extra the most time. She holds the Guinness World Record for being an extra in the most things. And she had an absolutely sort of fascinating take on the sort of background's eye view of the movie industry and who she was told never to make eye contact with, Tom Cruise. All the different things she's done over the years. And someone has tried to piece together all her little tiny momentary things. It was absolutely wonderful. So I recommend reading that. But in general, it's just not possible. The credits would go on for 15 years. It's
a nice gig, that. But you're right, there's an awful lot of negotiation over credits, certainly in TV where credits do have to be a certain length. And not everyone can be credited on every episode. So if you're in wardrobe or makeup, given you've got to fit them into 20 seconds sometimes, and there's 100 people who are genuinely integral to the show. Yeah. And as you say, by the way, the assistant to the carpenter is unbelievably integral to the show. The show doesn't work without all of that's one of the beauties about TV is there's behind the camera and in front of camera, and everyone does their job properly, and everyone needs to do their job properly. But yeah, you have to have big negotiations over who can get credited, who can be a producer.
Oh, the crediting of writers is a huge. Loads of people. I know so many people who've written a lot and put a lot into shows on which they receive absolutely zero credit for, and that is it's a very difficult thing to negotiate, and and you go into being an extra knowing that that's the
gig.
Yeah,
and it's
if
quite
you get
a fun
line,
gig.
You will be credited.
You'll be credited and paid an awful lot more money as well.
So much more than you would otherwise just for saying a tiny thing.
One of the fun things to watch in TV is if there's a scene where there's only 3 people in it, and one of them doesn't say anything throughout the whole scene. It's because they don't want to pay that person. Yeah. They're literally there as ballast. Always fun to watch those scenes and go, is that person an extra, or are they going to say something? Oh, they didn't say anything at all. We think, oh, okay, you just got a day rate. Whereas if they said something, a couple of grand.
Yeah, straight away. It's such a jump.
Yeah.
This is a question from Sam King, who says, I'd love to get your thoughts or insight into why the BBC has never thought to bring back Top of the Pops following its cancellation in 2006.
You know what? It's a really good question, and I have a lot of sympathy with Sam, because I used to love Top of the Pops, and, I still love the charts. I'll still look at the charts every week, and I'm a huge fan of current pop music. I think our generation's missing out on an awful lot of great music because we don't have Top of the Pops. I think the truth is the younger generation genuinely don't need
or care about it.
Top of the Pops.
No.
Well, it was last on in 2006, so if you're 17, it's something that happened before you were born. So it's not a brand that has a great deal of purchase.
And also, of course, you have a phone in your hand and you can watch the music you want whenever you want it. Having said that, one thing that, as we talked a little bit about in other areas of this show, things that are coming back are the idea, curation, the idea of playlists is huge. And so it's strangely, you think, oh, you can just get it on your own device. Why do you ever need someone to put together a show for you? Weirdly, people do, including young people, like things to be organised for them in this way because everyone likes to sit back a little bit and let something happen rather than having to do it all themselves. And actually, some of the trends, more and more of the are going back in the direction of curation and the equivalent of playlists. I'm using that as a modern idea of this, I guess, Top of the Pops as a playlist, but I suppose there was live performance element and video and things like that. But people like the idea of curation.
I think it's right. The repeats of the old Top of the Pops do great business for BBC4. They constantly, if ever you see trending, the Thompson twins trending, you think, oh, they're doing Top of the Pops from 1984.
Well, that's one of the things they've got the rights for because the BBC don't have the rights to so many of their shows, but they have all the rights to Top of the Pops, which is why they can keep putting that out.
I think one of the issues with obviously, so Top of the Pops as a brand, I think doesn't have the resonance it once had. But the idea of having a weekly chart show on a big terrestrial channel, I think the charts have changed an awful lot because of the era of streaming. I think if you look back at those old Top of the Pops, it's constantly changing. There's fun things going on, new bands suddenly emerging from nowhere. If you look at the top 10 this week, number one at the moment, which is Noah Khan, which is Stick Season. It's a genuinely brilliant song. It's an absolutely classic number one single that I think everybody would love. But it's been in the charts for 15 weeks. Stuff hangs around a lot. Jack Harlow's been in the charts for 9 weeks. He's in the top 10. Casso and Ray and D Block Europe, they've been in 22 weeks. They've been in the charts and they're number 5 at the moment. Tate McRae and Greedy, 17 weeks. Cruel Summer by Taylor Swift is in the top 10. It's been in the charts for 30 weeks. So the charts are quite blocked up. They're quite clogged with things. So if you're doing the rundown of the top 10 songs, it doesn't change an awful lot from week to week anymore, which I think loses some of the excitement of Top of the Pops, which is climbers, movers, like the highest new entry this week is number 16 or something. There's, it's the charts because of streaming, because of the way they're measured, things hang around a lot more. And if Taylor brings out a new album, suddenly she's got 6 songs in the top 10. Or if Drake does, he's got 12 songs in the top 20. So I think the charts are a different beast, that's for sure. I think really what we need is for people our age, and I'm assuming Sam King's age, a lovely show once a week that says, here's the new music. Here are the songs that are popular. Here's a couple of new things. That's the curation thing. Here's 10 songs that you can take into next week and you can talk about and you can listen to, one of which might become one of your new favourite songs because generation is missing out on all that music. So that show, I think, would be an interesting show to do. But I think a traditional Top of the Pops, which is the chart rundown, who's up, who's down, who's new entry, I think the charts are slightly too clogged to do that, and it's a shame. But Noah Khan's Stick Season, if you don't know, it's a very beautiful song.
That is it for this week. Do please send more emails in with your questions. therestisentertainment@gmail.com. They are so good. Really, anything on All Matters Entertainment.
Yeah, that was great fun. Thank you. I genuinely love TRIETQE, as the kids are calling it. So thank you very much, everyone, for your questions. And we'll see everyone on Tuesday, won't we?
Bye-bye.
Bye.